Curiosity. What are you so curious about? Everything, Mr. Curiosity.
All right, folks, Joe Snedeker here, Mr. Curiosity, and I've got a big one today. I don't know. I got a big one. I'm excited. I'm excited and nervous. I'll be honest with you. This is, I think it's episode number 54, 3, something like that. I'm becoming a veteran of podcasting. And I have Joseph W. Scotchlas from Joseph W. Scotchlas Funeral Home in Simpson, Lackawanna County. How you doing, Joe?
Good morning, Joe. How are you?
All right. So I've done everyone in this podcast from, politicians, leaders, weird leprechauns, the owner of Mrs. T's Pierogies, ex-WNEP and current WNEP employees. We've done them all.
Okay.
But never,
I've seen them.
but never a mortician. Now remember,
well, this will be different for both of us.
Yeah. So the title of the podcast is Mr. Curiosity. And I think the best things come naturally. And I'm a curious guy. I don't know if you know that. There's all these things I'm curious about. And,
okay.
Of course, your business, the things you do, I've thought about my whole life. I think every human being fears death. They're worried about death. They concentrate on death, even though you put it in the side of your brain. You don't even want to think about it. And here your career is dealing with death, right? I mean, that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So this is where I thought we'd start, simply with, how do you become you?
Okay. Well, each state is different, but in Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania requires, however you get it, a total of 60 credit hours, or essentially an associate's degree. When I went to a private school, so you had to go to 12 months of mortuary school. Now, a lot of it is picked up by community colleges, so they integrate it, and then essentially a year of internship.
And it seems like a lot of cases, but definitely not all, that it's usually like a family enterprise, isn't it? Did you get that from an uncle, a parent, or someone, or did you?
No, at the time I was a little different. I was not. But you're correct. Many of the businesses are years old, hundreds of years old, and they're passed down from generation to generation. I purchased 2 businesses here in Simpson and combined them. One was the old Powell family, and one was the old Pecco family that go back into the beginning of the 1900s.
Well, you have to. So here's the deal. Let's be right out there and honest and pure. Don't be offended.
Okay.
When someone says and they're in high school, they want to study weather or meteorology, what's the first thing people think? Oh, what a little nerd, right? I mean, come on, that's a little nerdy. That's me. And then when someone says, if they're in high school or 17, 18, I want to be a mortician, funeral director, I think the natural human reaction, whether it's right or wrong, is, wow, that guy's creepy. A little creepy.
It's creepy. Absolutely. Absolutely. Unless you're in a family business where they kind of accept that's what you've done. And that's what your family has done. I actually went into it later in life. So actually, I volunteered locally in the community ambulance service. So my background is emergency services and healthcare. So I did that in probably the mid 70s before I even got out of high school. And then I worked for the county through the first paramedic program out of CMC, and then for a private ambulance service. And I slowly developed an interest for the funeral service. So it's not like something that I thought of back in high school.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. I didn't know that. In full disclosure, we're friends.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And yeah. Joe was kind enough to take care of the needs of my family member when duty called. And you're a great guy and a good service to the community, and you're a good community member. You got it all, man. Everybody loves you. So it's nice to know then. So that wasn't in you from like 14, 15, 16, mortician, funeral director.
No, I mean, I think there was a little bit of curiosity, like Mr. Curiosity, but I didn't follow through on it. And the neat thing is, being in the small town we're here, most of the generation before us, they're kind of, dwindling out now, but they watched me grow up. Okay. So my father's family had a service station in town that I worked at through high school and college. And then when I came back to town and made the move to the other side of the bridge and came on the big side of the bridge, we purchased a business, and that the town was very welcoming, very supportive, and they've been throughout my whole life. Simpson, I could say nothing bad about. People have embraced me very well.
You got that right. Definitely a deep ethnic loving community. But Absolutely. Now, so that you told me the emergency service part. So even though I'm a science guy, I'm a physical science guy. I never liked the biological sciences because I wasn't big on dissections. I wasn't big on gory stuff and seeing, the internal structure of animals. Being that you were an EMT for a while, you started then being exposed to trauma, to death, to the negative consequences of life on human beings, correct? So you're already getting.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I can tell you, no matter what you think about or what anyone thinks about as far as the funeral business goes, to a certain point, the ambulance service gets into a little more gore because the people are alive still.
Yeah.
So what they see is pretty unusual. Pretty unusual.
And I hate to say it, Joe, but this is also human nature. I hate to say it. If you're not accustomed to seeing anything, most things in life, they're going to freak you out. But in your business, I guess when you start early on and you're seeing, when you were an EMT, trauma, death, suffering, and then you start building a career on dealing with humans that are dead, I don't want to say it becomes a little numbing, but you probably just become more accustomed to it. Yeah, you have to, right? It's human nature.
Yeah, absolutely. You do. I mean, it's not like, certain cases or certain families or people that you're, a little closer to. So it pulls a little on the emotional side of you, or children, for just about anybody. But to a certain point, you're removed from it. It's not that you're being callous to it, but you're a little bit removed about it. I mean, I don't think any one person could grieve emotionally for every funeral service they handled, or, they'd be getting psych treatment somewhere.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you got to distance yourself. It becomes a business, a caring, loving business. But yeah, you're right. You're removed from it.
Yeah, I mean, there's, unfortunately, there's only so much that any funeral director, mortician is going to do for the deceased. You get to a certain point and you've reached the end. But it's also, good to know that you've had great family relationships for the family that survives the deceased, and how you work with them and the choices they make and the relationships you make with them. That's a rewarding point. And everybody comes in from a different walk of life, a different thought, a different mindset as to, especially now, as opposed to when I started 37 years ago in Simpson, what they want out of the funeral service, or what their needs are.
Because it's new to everybody.
Yeah.
It's usually a new thing and you're the expert, but we'll get to that later. I got to build up to that. So here's what I'm wondering. Some of these, and you may not even know, but I'm sure you do because you're filled with all this knowledge. Let's say you and I are hiking on the Appalachian Trail.
Okay.
We're in the middle of nowhere, right? You don't have a cell phone, or there's no cell phone service. I get bit by a snake, I'm dead. That's it. It's over. You can't call anyone. It's getting dark out. You're going to stay the night. You got to bury me. You're going to dig a hole and you're going to bury me. That in itself is not illegal. You had no other option, I guess. But yet, if I have 100 acres in Bradford County and grandma dies, I can't just bury her, correct? What are these rules now for when someone does die? What does the state say you have to do?
Well, I'm not sure about the Appalachian Trail example, but anyway.
Well, what are you going to do? Leave me there?
Well, I
let's say you're hours and hours away from civilization. You have to bury me. You're not going to leave me there.
So anyway, yeah, you have to, in most areas, or at least in Pennsylvania, if you have an area on your own property, we've been involved with this, where people will take a certain amount of land. That doesn't happen very, very frequently, but I've been involved with it once or twice, where they actually take it out of their deed and it becomes a family cemetery.
Oh, I didn't know that. You can do that, but you have to go through a number of hoops and papers and make that family cemetery.
Yeah, and you need to have so much beginning property. It's not like you can, bury some in the backyard here in Simpson. But
right.
If you have property, you can actually legally do it. But for the most part, in Pennsylvania, the funeral director, is required for filing the death certificate, and that's how the state and the federal government keep statistics on us. Also, what happens is, and then we obtain our burial permits. Years ago, there was an opportunity for those in the Amish sect to care for their own families and do their own burials in their cemeteries. But with the advent of electronic death certificates now, that's pretty much gone. So for the most part, they all use a funeral home. I have a friend that's down in that area, and for the most part, they all use a funeral home in one sense or another, whether it's just for the filing of the paperwork, or if it's, embalming preparations, or actually providing the entire funeral service.
So there's no way of getting around you guys.
For the most part, I would say that, you'd have to use a funeral home or a funeral director at some point somewhere. There's a different amount of services.
A lot of states pretty similar. Like
most of the states are similar. Some of them are actually a little more stringent. Pennsylvania is a little bit more, slightly more lenient. New York has a little stronger rules, I would say.
Yeah, I can tell you're uncomfortable though with the Appalachian Trail question. You don't know what to do with me.
I don't know that. I don't know that burying directly is the answer on that.
Because you have to return to civilization, which is hours and hours away. You can't just leave my body there. What are you going to do? You better bury me, or an animal's going to eat me.
I don't know. I don't want to be saying that that's the right thing to do. Somebody shoots somebody on the Appalachian Trail and bury them, and they said, "Oh, you got bit by a snake." And Scotchlas said it was okay to bury him there. I don't know if I want to go down that rabbit hole.
Okay, see, folks, he's trying to be too politically correct. I love it. All right, we won't go on the Appalachian Trail hiking together. Okay, let's just.
All right, we won't do that.
So is when. Let's have a different scenario. Let's say I'm living alone, and let's say it's me, and I pass out for natural reasons, and I'm dead. Could you? What's the first thing? Let's say the UPS looks in the window and he sees me, and who does he call? What's the first thing he does? He would call the police, 911. When do you come into the scene is what I'm wondering.
Much later, because any unattended death is going to be investigated by the coroner's office.
So coroner always first.
Coroner is always first. That's the legal authority, and they determine the cause, manner, and
no matter what, a coroner must be involved first. Like, let's say it's a husband and wife, and the husband has a heart attack. Then the wife calls 911. Is the coroner going to come over?
They're going to be notified whether
they
physically come to the scene or not. They're going to be notified. Yeah. And at their option and discretion, they can either investigate it further or not. Just like the coroner is notified on every single cremation that happens, on any medical donation that happens, any unattended death, any death after surgery.
Interesting.
Any trauma, homicide, suicide, anything like that. Coroner's office is actually a very powerful office in relationship to death investigation.
No, I did not know that. Okay, so then continuing on with the scenario, the coroner comes over, pronounces the body dead, does proper paperwork, filing with the county or whatever, and then what? Then
the family can say, okay, call Joe, and then we would either come to the residence if that's where the decedent was still at, or take the deceased into our care from the coroner's office if they had transported it there. And that's what I'm curious about. So it's out so you're visiting a lot of you are the guy, aside from the official coroner or EMT or county person, you're the next guy to show up. So you've seen it all. Yeah. And early on in the career, I actually did some work for one of the county coroners around here where we actually did the transferring. So when they had a death, we would go to the home and then, help them transport the person into our care until the family decided, which funeral home they were going to use or what was going to happen. But
that must be difficult. That was got to be a difficult stage then, because you're almost first on scene for a lot of these things, second or third.
Yeah, it is. So, I guess the background in the ambulance business helped that a lot because
yeah, that's right.
you don't know
Because
what
you
you're
were that
seeing.
person, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
when is a morgue involved?
I'm sorry?
When is a morgue involved as opposed to? I guess what I'm saying is is there a county morgue everywhere, or does the body go to the morgue or right to your facility, or is that the same thing? I'm not sure of all that. What's going on in my head here?
Well, currently, in today's standard, yeah, they go to, either a mortuary, which is a funeral home, um, at the family request if the coroner has released it, or if not, they go to the coroner's office. So, like in Lackawanna County, Tim E. Rowland is the coroner. Tim has an office over in Dunmore, and where they would bring the deceased. They have a forensic pathologist. They chose to do an autopsy, and then the person is released from there. So, although Pennsylvania has a coroner system, by and large, the coroner can request an autopsy. The coroner may not legally do an autopsy because, in most cases, they're not a physician.
This is the part that always bothered me. Okay, so I'm a healthy 56-year-old guy right now, but who knows what's going on internally? Let's say I'm dead tonight at 6 o'clock. By 8, 9, 10 o'clock tonight, there could be an autopsy on me. And that's like the farthest thing from my mind that I can be on some table and there is a professional taking apart my body. That could be happening tonight. Correct?
Well, or tomorrow morning. They usually don't work. They don't work late night. But
I guess what I'm saying is if someone dies and they need to find out why, if my wife is right here and saying, no, I don't want you to do this, it's going to happen.
Depending upon the circumstances of what they think is going on, what's happening, what the environment is, what
if it looks a little suspicious, I guess.
Essentially that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, if it looks a little suspicious, someone in your age group, probably they would question it a little bit more. A 90-year-old gentleman, probably not, especially if he's been seeing his physician and has, a whole host of medical problems.
Right.
So it depends upon the circumstance.
But because I was always of the impression that it's somehow related to a crime, autopsies, crime, something taboo happened, but not necessarily. If it's just something that no one has the correct answer to, they're going to do an autopsy. And there's nothing.
Or at least they have the option of doing the autopsy. Just like when someone chooses, so, we take it one step further and Dawn says, she wants to cremate Joe and get rid of Joe quickly. We still have to wait legally 24 hours in the state of Pennsylvania. So we have to
24 hours from what? The time of death?
From the time you're pronounced. Yeah. And that gives the coroner's office that additional 24 hours to investigate the death should
just
they want
in case it's fishy and
the
body is burned and now there's no evidence.
Right.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So Pennsylvania is 24. I know Florida is, I think, 48 hours or so. Each state is different, but there's a little gap in there so that you can't essentially, murder someone and then, hope to get away with it real easily.
So if anyone's listening, never push cremation. Never push cremation. It's suspicious. Speaking of, on a similar topic, I remember when I was in college and I was studying, I took a few graduate level biological courses. And do I have this right? In the first 8 hours of most deaths, I think it's the first 8, 9, 10 hours, the body is getting rigid, but it's still a little flexible.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Rigor mortis will come into the deceased and then probably leave 24 to 48 hours thereafter. It's
like
totally
after
gone.
10 hours, you're getting rigor mortis. You're fairly stiff, right? But then it
Correct.
leaves a day or two after that or something like that.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it can occur much quicker than the 10 hours by far. It can start taking shape in a matter of a couple of hours, but usually within a day or two, it will actually start releasing or dissipating.
So in that period, not that I'm trying to be too gory, but we are curious about this. So in that period where it's stiffening, how stiff? I mean, are we talking like a piece of plywood? Is it very rigid or like stiff?
It's stiff, but body, you can actually exercise the joints.
Okay.
So you take an arm and move the arm. And
I see. But it's stiff initially, but you're going to start working it.
Right. And it will essentially break up or move or leave for that period of time. Yeah.
So you're not breaking anything, but I guess I forget the process that happens. Do you remember that? Do you know what's happening that causes that stiffness, that rigor?
It's a change in the chemical imbalance
Yeah, I
in
remember
the
it's like
body. I don't remember exactly.
yeah, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. That's getting
No, that's
into,
okay.
but I did. I
Yeah.
remember I studied all that too, and there was different stages: rigor mortis, alga mortis, or something. It's
Well,
funny.
rigor mortis is the stiffness
Right.
essentially. Algor mortis is the coldness of the body.
Oh, okay. All right.
Livor mortis is the blood settling in the dependent parts of the body. So if the
Gotcha.
body is laying face up, the blood is going to settle towards essentially the back or the bottom of the body.
Oh, I
It's
see.
always going to go with gravity. So, when you see your crime scene stories and, somebody came and rolled the body over and the body is still
Oh, yeah,
blue in the
yeah.
face, well, the body was actually face down in the beginning, probably,
Oh,
or at least
interesting.
most times.
So could you see that visibly, like in the flesh, like there's the blood
Oh, yeah.
pooling?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
So if
Yeah,
I
you
were on
can,
my side, you would see half of my face, maybe one color, and the other half not so much.
depending upon how long it was laying. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
And we've all seen the dead animals on the side of the road, deer bloated. That'll happen to a human too. The bacteria decomposition causes gases and that bloats
Right.
up.
And that's one of the reasons why we actually do the embalming preparation to, not only somewhat preserve the body, but more importantly, to stop or slow that process down.
Yeah, because so how I guess bacteria will take anything. They'll break down anything, skin, bone, muscle. So how does that? And I wanted to get into the preparation a little bit later on, but what the heck, we're there now. So how does the fluids that you replace stop the bacteria? Is it just too toxic for them and they don't even bother?
It stiffens or coagulates with protein and carbohydrate. So, the basic thing that we use at the funeral home, most laboratories use, hospitals use to fix tissue is some type of formalin. Formalin is an alcohol base, is what it really
Right.
is. But that's what they use. And once it affixes to the tissue, it preserves it and holds it for a period of time.
Oh, I see. So there's less food for the bacteria
Right.
because the
Right.
bacteria don't want to work on that alcohol. So a typical human body, I guess, when you receive it, the draining of this thing is what do we have? Like 1.5 gallons of blood? I'm trying to picture a gallon of milk, maybe a gallon and a half of fluids come out of a typical human.
Yeah,
Less.
something like that. Somewhere like that. I mean, I think there was something where I had read one time, it's, somewhere in the area of around a gallon per 50 or 75 pounds of body weight.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense then. So about a gallon and a half. But is that just going down the drain and into the treatment plant like anything else you would put down the drain?
Yeah, we're doing the same thing that they do in the hospital, that they do in the nursing home or if you're sick at home and blood goes down the drain, it's pretty much all the same thing. The treatment plants are capable of handling that and breaking it down. In addition to, there is some secondary dilution with the formaldehyde, so some of that is actually going out with the blood. So some of that
Oh,
is
yeah.
being treated on the way.
No, but you're right. We have this, it's kind of a, maybe it's a narcissism where we think, how dare our fluids be added to the earth? But we are just an animal of the earth. So, blood going into the treatment plant is a lot better than a can of turpentine or Lysol, or anything else you use at your house. We're natural. We're a part of the planet.
Well, in some religious beliefs, number one, they may not embalm, or number two, they want any, blood to be buried with the deceased.
Oh, I
So
did not know that.
so I had a gentleman at one time that the family was in an accident. There was blood, and they actually went back and brought the blood mixed with the dirt and was buried with the person
Oh, that's
in
interesting.
the grave. You know what I mean?
Well, so that brings up a question I had then. We always hear about people who say, I want to be buried with. What if a guy like me who's a cyclist says, I want my bike to be buried with me? I mean, Do you have
Joe,
to
if you got money, we'll figure it out. So yes, yeah, you could do certain things. I mean, there's always the story where
you're not going to put a
was
Corvette in the grave, right? I mean,
but I think there is one of those somewhere that somebody did. I don't know, but I've read about it. I don't know what exactly the background is to it, whether you have to remove all the oil, the gasoline,
right.
You have to buy multiple graves. I don't know the full story behind that, but I do in fact know that at least there was stories or pictures of someone being buried in an automobile.
So without disrespecting all of your customers, no specifics, of course, have you done items like bikes or something kind of larger and unusual? Or not? That's not common. Not very common. Not very common.
No, I haven't been involved with any of that directly. No.
Huh.
No.
That's interesting. Could I wonder if if a husband and wife, my wife and I don't know, we both have heart attacks at the same time, and I say let's put it's in my will, 2 of us in one casket.
That's not going to work too well.
That's not going to work. Okay.
That's not going to work too well. Although I've been involved with a mother and a child, or children, or something like that. So, that has happened.
Well, that brings up something I just thought of, and I am such an irresponsible idiot. I am 56 years old, and I still do not have a will. If I were to die today, my poor wife's going to say, I don't know what he wanted. Did he want this casket? Did he want cremation? Did he want nothing? I have nothing done. So how does that all work? Is it just because they always say the funeral is not for the dead, but the living. So now it's up to everyone, the loved ones, to decide, usually, correct?
Yeah. And I mean, so there's 2 different things there that you're talking about. No, number one is a will. So, right. I mean, talking about me personally, my wife and I made a will when our first child was born. I mean, we didn't own much of anything. We had a lot of mortgages and a lot of debts, but we wanted to decide if we were killed together, like you're saying, what would happen to the care, custody, control of that child? Right. Where would that go?
Right.
To us, that was paramount. That was our most valuable thing we had was our child. And as you get, as the children get older, you start acquiring things, a home and possessions and stuff. So the will goes through and, says where those items are going to go, be it your wife, be it children, or,
right. That sort of
community donations. The other thing you were talking about is more funeral arrangements or pre-arrangements, which
isn't that done as a part of the will or no? No, that's not usually.
So not fully in the will. It's not fully in the will. A lot of times they're done at the same time, but the total funeral arrangements are usually not in the will, because sometimes, or a lot of times, the will is opened or read after the funeral service.
Oh. So you're telling me and people like me, get off your rear end and make funeral arrangements now.
Yeah. I encourage it for everyone so that people have an idea, or your family has an idea. What do you want? Do you want a viewing? You don't want a viewing? You want to be buried? You want to be cremated? You're going to donate your body to science? What direction do you want to go? And people have some idea as to what you want.
So I'm wondering then so you have to honor if I come to you and arrange my funeral and I say, I want disco lights, no video wall, no pictures, blah, blah, blah. And it's semi-bizarre, but we sign this document. I don't tell anybody. Then I'm dead. And then my wife sees this and goes, what was he thinking? We're not doing that. I'm sorry, Joe. We're going to change this around. Does that ever happen? Does it get complicated?
It can. I mean, there's cases that have gone to court because, one part of the family wants to do one thing and another part of the family wants to do something else. I don't think that happens very often. Naturally, like anybody else, you try to reach a compromise. It's right. A difficult time when someone's passes away, but you try to hope that the family honors the person's wishes as best that person wanted, and yet give the family that's left, some fulfillment and some ability to grieve, but yet not be turned upside down in turmoil because of, what the person has decided.
Oh, so sometimes there could be a little leeway.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm thinking of bizarre scenarios. I admit that. I'm thinking of things you'll probably never encounter. I get
yeah,
that.
I mean, for the most part, people will try, and we try to follow your wishes as much as possible. And quite frankly, most times we follow the wishes 100%. It's just if the family, the next of kin, your wife says, nah, we're going to compromise. Joe wanted a viewing, but he wanted to be buried. And I think now that I'm going to move to Cape Coral and I'm going to have him cremated and take him with me. I have a son that lives there.
You do?
Yeah.
Listen, that's a long story. My mother-in-law has a place there. So that's actually pretty possible what you're saying there now.
So what happens is because, America's become transient, right? We move a lot. Family moves a lot. I have a son that lives in Cape Coral. I have another guy that's moving to Binghamton. My daughter is doing traveling nursing and is in Philadelphia. So that's what has changed and made changes in the funeral customs and business because people are moving.
Yeah, I guess so.
Where years ago, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry to bother you. Years ago, it was what? It was different.
Well, everybody came back, right? Years ago,
yeah.
They came back to Simpson or they came back to wherever they were originally from. Now they came back from the service, but maybe they decide to, take them back to where they're currently living at. Mom is here, dad passed away, mom's going to go live with the children. Mom doesn't want dad left here. And either she buries him here and she's going to come back to be buried, or B, they're going somewhere totally different.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, but I'm still curious. So there is a little bit of a leeway there. I didn't realize that. And sometimes in my cases, let's say I am deceased and my wife says, let's do this, maybe cremation. And my 3 kids are like, no, let's give them a funeral. I mean, how does you kind of try to persuade them in a certain direction, or do you let them decide or fight it out? You almost have to be like a counselor.
I mean, it's ultimately their decision. And in that scenario, it's ultimately your wife's decision.
Oh, okay.
She gets to say she's the next of kin. She gets to say, but you try to.
She's still pushing everyone around, even in my death.
Even in your death. In your death. So, she ultimately has the say as to what's happening.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's interesting. And you see, because you said you've been doing this how long now?
I'm on my own 37 years. I worked in the business for a few years before that.
All right. So let's go. Could you say 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, how things have changed since you started and evolved?
Yeah. I mean, here in Simpson or, most of the Northeast, I don't, any particular town or city, there's several things that have changed. I mean, we're losing population.
Okay.
People's ideas of funerals have changed. People's attendance or involvement in organized sacramental religion has decreased.
Right.
So all of those things kind of tend to change things. When I started in 85 on my own, we were still doing a viewing one night, an afternoon and an evening viewing the next day, and then the funeral the third day. And that was almost every funeral, to the point now where we're seeing a lot of one-day services.
Get them in, get them out.
People come in for an hour or two, and then we do a mass, we do a service in the funeral home or something, and then the person is buried or cremated or whatever the final disposition is.
Oh, I see. What about the percentage of cremations versus burials? Has that changed?
That has increased. Yeah, that's increased. We still see in this community a lot of people doing a visitation and service first. So whether it's going to church for a mass or having a service in the funeral home and then being cremated. Although there's other areas not terribly far away from us where direct cremation is by far a higher percentage. And by direct cremation, I mean no viewing, no service, no nothing. The person is just ultimately cremated after that 24-hour period.
And I wonder why that is. Less family bonds, less close knit family members. You wonder why? I don't know. I'm not.
Yeah, I think there's a few things that play into that. Yeah, people move here from somewhere else, so there is no family bonds, there is no family ties. Some of it could be financial. There's different things that play into that.
When I'm riding my bike, I'll often see in some rural places, Susquehanna, Wayne, and even Lackawanna County, I'll see what looks like, and this goes back to what you said earlier, little graveyard cemeteries in like people's yards. I mean, was it less regulated then? And they just had, here's Uncle Fred and here's my wife, and let's just put them in the side of the yard, that kind of thing. You'll see these
I don't know how much
they're tilted over, and
I don't know how much
1800s.
How much it was or wasn't regulated, I guess. But I think there were a lot more family cemeteries, especially in those farming areas. So I think that was not uncommon.
Yeah, isn't that something?
Even in the community cemeteries, it wasn't uncommon for essentially like grandparents who passed away in the 30s, 40s, 50s to buy 8 and 10 graves with the thought that every one of their children would be buried with them. And you'll find a lot of those graves are not necessarily used because the children moved for jobs, work, whatever, and established families and roots somewhere else, and they didn't come back to Simpson, Carbondale, whatever the town may be.
Boy, and this is a little uncomfortable for me to talk about, but it's funny. This is human nature again. You were great with my parents in the whole process, and it was hard.
Thanks.
It's hard for anybody. But I remember when I was going around looking at the various caskets, I remember thinking, this is no time to be cheap. And if I did want one of the lower priced ones, I felt I'm doing a disservice to my parents. And of course, it's not the matter of the price, but you feel guilty if you cheap out then. And it's just human nature. It's like you're put in that position. You're like, oh God, it's not like you're buying a car for a cheap car that's going to break down. This doesn't matter, but yet you think you have to get the best. It's weird the way the brain works. You get that a lot?
I think people feel that. I think there's definitely a feel for that. I mean, 2 things I can say to that. Number one, that's why I encourage pre-arrangements.
Yeah, another good reason, right? Hey, when I'm taking care of this, it's over.
Nobody's deceased. You make your own choices. You make your own wishes, And then with some changes in the law and the way funerals are handled, we basically are selling to the families caskets for basically the price we get them for anymore. We don't mark them up only because I don't know if you are going to choose cremation or if you're going to bring a casket in that you bought at Costco or somewhere else because it's legal and I have to accept that casket.
I've seen the flyers in the Sunday paper.
Yeah, so I have to accept that casket. So from a business standpoint, I can't gamble every time someone comes to my door.
I see.
So we charge more for what we physically do and less on caskets, vaults, urns, all of those other items, because, if you come into our funeral home today, I don't care if you buy the $700 casket or the $4,000 casket.
Yeah.
I'm making the same amount of money. So I'm not trying to push you or persuade you. Actually, the converse is true now. I'm going to say to you, you know what, Joe, this is a nicer option. It's a little bit less money because I want you going out the door feeling better next week that you didn't overspend.
Right. And that you brought up the best point of the day is prearrange, because then if you prearrange, now the pressure's off the family members. Because if I prearrange my funeral today with you, I'll get the cheapest casket, the cheapest everything, the cheapest this, the cheapest that. And then my family can come to you and say, well, he did it, not us. So I guess we're going with the cheapest everything.
We're off the hook.
We're off the hook.
Yeah.
So what is required when you do put a body into the earth? What are the bare bone essentials?
Essentially, I mean, you could do a thing that's called direct burial. So when you do a direct burial, or there's a thing called green burial.
Right.
So as far as merchandise or items, if you were to go to a green cemetery, the person is
sounds trendy.
It is. It is. There's none locally. I think there's one up outside of Ithaca. There's one or two down in the Lancaster area. So they tend to be hybrid. So they're regular traditional cemeteries that you think of,
right,
with a green area. So the green area doesn't use vaults. A lot of times either uses like a cardboard, fiberboard, or wicker casket. Sometimes the body is just buried in a shroud itself. There's no grave markings or anything like that. So that's a bare minimum.
Oh, I didn't know that. So then you're one with the earth. And I imagine, are you still allowed to use the formaldehyde products? Because now I imagine they don't want to toxify the soil.
Right. So most of those people are not that you can't be, but a lot of those people tend not to be embalmed.
Isn't that something? I never heard of that. So these things are not really regulated. Although, for example, if you go to a church cemetery, they're not going to allow that in most cases, right?
Right. And that's regulated not by the state, but by the cemetery itself. And most cemeteries around here require an outside concrete, what we know as a burial vault.
Gotcha. And on a similar subject, the old 6 feet under that everybody says, I'll do this when I'm 6 feet under. It's not 6 feet, right?
So maybe to the bottom of the grave at 6 feet. The state talks about 18 inches of dirt from the top of the lid of the vault to
the
earth surface. Yeah.
1.5 feet.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be 6 feet. I wonder where that even came from.
I think they were talking about how deep they may have dug them,
right,
to the bottom of the grave. I'm assuming that's where it came from.
So most of the ones you see, are they digging down about 5-6 feet first, at least?
Yeah, I would say so. You know, I mean,
I come to you and I put in my my burial arrangement, I only want to be 1.5 feet under.
Well, so that's to the top of the outer container.
Yeah.
So then it goes back to
3 feet.
But we're only talking about to the top of it, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So you have to leave room for the container or the vault.
I still think I can come under 6 feet. I'm gonna be a shallow.
I believe you can. I believe you can be less than 6 feet, but you're 1.5 feet, and the vault is probably 3.5 foot high.
Yeah.
So you may not be 6, but you're creeping there. You're in that direction.
Well, when I die of the snake bite and we're on the Appalachian Trail, you're just going to probably a little bit of dirt on top of me, right? It's going to be
a little bit of dirt. Yeah.
All right. How about mausoleums? Now, how does that enter the whole scene here? I mean, that's the opposite of what you said with the green burial. Now it seems a little bit more elaborate and expensive, but that's just my prejudice. I don't know if that's true.
It doesn't have to be, but it can be. In a lot of cemeteries, because of their costs of operation and their staff, a lot of times the burial overall charges for the grave, the vault, a stone is going to be the same as or very close to, a mausoleum crypt with the lettering and stuff. So when someone dies, we, after the service, the casket, we go to the cemetery. So you're either being buried or you're being placed in a mausoleum crypt. The casket goes into a crypt.
And a crypt is more just it's almost like a cement cylinder type thing. It's protected.
Yeah. Usually they're not, there's very few family ones because of the expense. So usually they're community ones. And yeah, it's essentially the size of the casket to put a casket in. Sometimes they're head to head for a husband and wife.
Right.
But that's what they are.
To me, you're putting an awful lot of faith in the human race, because what if in 100 years, 200 years, America doesn't even exist anymore and it's some Mad Max world. Now all these buildings are on top of the earth and who knows what's going to happen, right?
Well, I don't know. I think we had that conversation at a party one night. What was going to happen long after we're gone?
Yeah, well, I know this, that the ice age will be coming back. So there's going to be a mile wall of glacial ice coming all the way from the Arctic over all of these cemeteries and tombstones. And this whole area is going to be glaciated again. It went through about a dozen or so cycles and it's coming back. So everything on our surface is going to be scoured out by glaciers. It might be thousands of years in the future, but it's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
That's the science. That's the scientific fact.
All right.
One of my last requests for you, do you remember I asked you this? I said, okay, I definitely don't want cremation because speaking of the future, my plan is this. I'll make arrangements with you. And then I'm going to put on my headstone, please clone me and bring me back. That's going to be right there with my name. So now I'm thinking a future civilization, whether it's 50 years, 100 years, 300 years, 500 years, they're cloning people. But they're like, well, I don't know. We can't disrespect these people that have been buried or, of course, cremated. Then your cells are gone. But look at this guy. He has right on his tombstone, bring me back, clone me. He's basically giving us a signed, go do it. And
go do it.
So I may then be brought back in the future because I'm going to have that on my headstone. What do you think?
I don't know. It's possible, I guess.
Because my cells will still be intact, like we're cloning woolly mammoths and things. I can be brought back. I'm going to be the only one.
You'll be back at 16 by yourself.
I don't know. I think I got a good plan. This is my plan to eternal life or semi-eternal life. Clone me, written right on my headstone. Bring me back. Well, this was an excellent conversation. I appreciate it. The only unanswered question, and I'm still confused about, otherwise you educated our audience immensely, is why wouldn't you just bury me after the snake bite? It's going to be a long walk for you to get back to civilization. You have to do that. You can't just leave me there.
Okay, so we'll put you in a little bit of dirt and we'll go back and call the authorities when we get back.
Okay, but at least I'll be protected for a day or two before you get back, because they'll have to bring the helicopter. There's no roads or anything.
Right. But the problem is if I go on a hike with Joe and Joe doesn't come back, the first thing they want to know is, what did you do with Joe?
Yeah, and then you say snake bite and they go, yeah, right.
Yeah,
right.
Sure.
All right, Joe, this was outstanding. Did we leave anything out?
I think that's the biggest thing, That's
I think we covered everything. This is a curious subject, and I can almost say certainly, whether people wanted to admit it or not, every human being is a little afraid of death, if not scared to death of death, and I am. So the more we learn about it and educate ourselves, I guess the better we'll all be, and you helped us do that.
Thank you.
All right, is there anything you would like to tell the listeners in case they want to find you? You can look you up anywhere on the internet, or just come and visit, right?
Yeah, come and visit. They can call us at the funeral home number 570-282-3090, or go on the web, scotchlasfuneralhome.com, and they can see us. We'd be happy to sit down and answer your questions, even if they didn't use me. I mean, there's still, the questions are going to be basically the questions. We have people. I had a woman a few years ago that did her pre-arrangement and then decided she was moving to Puerto Rico. So she contacted a funeral home down there, and we sent all the arrangements down there to the funeral home in Puerto Rico.
Wow. Yeah.
So things can travel.
You'll handle any situation.
You got it.
Well, I know I mean this in the right way, but I hope you never have to deal with my body. You're just a little bit older than me, so hopefully I'll go, later on, before you're retired, way after you're retired.
There you go.
All right. We'll leave it up to someone else.
Okay. Perfect.
No one wants to see me naked. Maybe dead, but not naked.
There you go. Wow.
All right. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Joe.
Bye-bye.
Curiosity. What are you so curious about? Everything, Mr. Curiosity. About